What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA crunch time for UFC London. We have 15 fights. Wait, you're not Blender. This is
Yeah,
Squirrel Patrol. John, how's it going? Nice to finally meet you, do a show with you. You're killing the MMA game, man. I know you won't talk it up yourself, but I've been watching from afar. I love your articles now, contrarian takes. Tell me, how's it going?
good. Yeah, I'm excited to be doing my first UFC show. Yeah, I've been doing some of our written content for like a few years, kind of on off and on. But yeah, just restarted like the Squirrel Patrol's takedowns article, like just some contrarian plays I like each week. Had some good fortune in the DraftKings, like the live final last month in Jacksonville. I got to go inside the octagon. I thought that was awesome. And the live finals are always fun. And then, I've had some good success in the contest as well. I've hit the 555 like with first and second over the past month, and then had one of the $15 or $18 contests. I tied for first place, like 45 people. But yeah, it's been a good run for UFC, and I've been a big fan of the Ground and Pound podcast for years now. Like watching that, that's like my main piece of content, my main podcast that I consume. And then, you and Liam's got his own like stuff out on YouTube, like his picks. I mean, he really knows how to analyze the game. So, glad to be here and excited for this card.
Yeah, the MMA RotoGrinders team getting stronger every single week. And a few weeks ago, I feel like there was 8 of the 10 top 5 in the 555 scroll. We were all right there. So let's put it together this week. 15 fights, long time coming. Of course, we said, hey, 15 fights. We can't have Blender. Why would we have Blender on a Blender card? It's a little bit of everything. I almost wish there was a couple more flyweight fights that I could target that are a little bit more action ridden, but there's enough finish equity. There's money line opportunities that are open on this one. A big main event favorite that's in a heavyweight fight. That what does this thing look like down the stretch if it does get there? A lot of different variables. What are your X's and O's, and what do you do on a card like this to start your slate? Because I think that would be a good way to kick this off.
So my main strategy, like if you're playing the $18 contest, right, any large field contest, I'm probably going to end up underweight Tom Aspinall, which is a scary thought, and just distribute that ownership down amongst the other 9,000 fighters, and even some of the mid-range guys that I kind of wrote up. I just think 15 fights, like you're going to have some big scores, and like the best thing I think I do for UFC is I try to think of what is it going to look like at the end of the card, right? Because when you're looking at it right now, like the first guy you got to put in your lineup is Tom Aspinall, right? He's got a 50% chance of a first round finish. And that's, he's going to score incredibly high. There's 15 fights. So there's going to be most likely 15 winners at the end of this card. Is Aspinall's score like going to hold up against those other 14 winners? Like we're going to have some random people coming in, with first round finishes we kind of didn't expect. You look at like last week's card, like Dudakova, was pretty underowned, and there was a reason, right? We didn't expect a high volume. And she punches her opponent once, and Estela Nunez falls down and dislocates her elbow, and it's a first round knockout. So you just kind of never know how the scores are going to end up at the end of the card, but you're going to have probably 15 winners in this one. And I just think there's a good chance that Aspinall gets priced off the card. Now, I'm obviously not fading him entirely. Just going to try to aim to be a little bit underweight. Like I think we have him at like mid 50s ownership or something like that. So I'll probably be maybe like 20 or something.
The smaller the field, the more op you'd be playing him. Correct?
Yeah. So and then like in the 555, they'd be more likely to like match or be closer to that like 55% ownership or whatever we've got him pegged at.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's where I think you really have to start. And you can actually build some upside lineups without him. I mean, he is 200 more expensive than any other fighter on this whole entire slate. But, I keep hearing this narrative that the people aren't going to go to the mid-range. I think my bread and butter this week is in that mid-range. I understand the people that want to go stars and scrubs. There's going to be one underdog on this slate that I feel like everyone's going to want to click. And I bet you know exactly who I'm talking about. It's a heavyweight fight. It's going to be a sloppy heavyweight fight. Mick Parkin, like I have concerns. Like this guy could just lose by getting like taken down at will. That's a weird fight on this slate. Would you agree? Like I understand why people are going to Parkin. He has first round equity. We don't know what he's going to look like in the second and third round. So like, how do you handle when you have a chalky guy that's going to be like 33% owned, absorbing a lot of underdog ownership?
Yeah, just go into the field, right?
Yeah.
Like you're running lineups, and yeah, I mean, just take the guys that are immediately above or below him. So we've got like Parkins at 7,300. I mean, I really like Josh Kulabau. He's one of the guys I wrote up. I mean, I think that he can get the win, and it's not necessarily going to be the highest scoring win if he gets it, but I think he's got win equity, right? And he doesn't need to go berserk at like 7,400 to land on the winning lineup.
Point per dollar, he's going to get there. Like, I think any sort of win for Kulabau does score well. Make sure you guys are looking at the lineup HQ, subscribing, because Squirrel and I both put our tags on there. Cough, cough. We might have both tagged Kulabau. We do like him. I think he's got equity too. And I think he's kind of an organic play because Murphy's fights are always close. You know what I mean, John? Like they are. The problem is he's got the home crowd. There will be a home cooking. Okay. This isn't a bold take. There's going to be some home cooking on this card because it's in England. I don't know if you've ever watched some of these fights over there, but it's greasy.
Yeah. I think, wasn't it the Canadian card where every single Canadian fighter won?
Yeah.
It'll be tough for that to happen on this card because there's 12 fighters from the UK. So like 12 of the 15 fights have somebody from the UK. That would be outrageous if all 12 of those win. So yeah, I do think there's going to be some home cooking, obviously, but I just can't hit every single fight. So
no. You can't. You're not Vegas Dave. You can't just hit every single fight. Come on, Squirrel.
I'm just saying that I don't think all 12 UK fighters can win. And there's this thought that maybe the UFC kind of gives the judges a nod or a nudge sometimes, right? Like the UFC kind of has guys they want to win, but I think on some of the cards as well, like we have other cards coming up. Like we have a card I think coming up in France, so there's an idea that maybe like some of the French fighters, right? If they win, they could like end up on that French card or whatever the case might be. I think there's like a New Zealand. I think Kulabau is like New Zealand, or he's from that region, so he could. There's going to be a card, I guess, in Sydney, so it can go either way, right? So I do think that you have to think maybe if it goes to decision, some of the fighters could get a little bit of a bump being from the UK. But we saw, like I wrote in the article, like Ash Moose, right? Like beat Sam Patterson. Patterson's from the UK, and that was just in the last London card. So.
Yeah, that was a great leverage spot. I mean, I feel like this guy's going to be under-owned until he starts beating some top-tier guys, Ash Moose. But that's an interesting fight. Now, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal sports betting state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customers can bet $5 and get $100 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions do apply. Now, John, I don't know if you dabble in the betting side of things, but this is going to be a hedge out type of card. And I say more so than ever, you're going to know where you're going to be by the last fight of the night. And if I have any lineups that have Tom Aspinall, I'm going to put a couple shekels on the old Marcin Tybura. I mean, it's just going to have to happen. And I think there's also some live spots where I think you're going to see, somebody take over first or second round. And then guys tend to gas out too, like that, have a bad gas tank, right? Like this, let's go middle range, okay? Like this Marcos fight and Grant, I don't know why I'm starting here, but I just can see this fight being volatile.
Yeah, I think so. And there's been a little bit of like line movement in favor of Grant, and actually Parsons as well. I think has gotten it's Roberts has gotten the line movement over Parsons. And Roberts' line movement is actually pretty significant. It's like it changes the implied win like a few percentage points.
His ownership stayed the same.
Was it?
His ownership stayed the same
Yeah,
because
his ownership
Parsons
still
had
wrong.
better inside the distance.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if people will like catch on onto that late line movement either. But I the Grant Marcos fight, yeah, is one of those ones probably going to go under owned. And it like David Grant fights always have action.
Yeah.
That is not going to be a fight where they're like David Grant's just kind of standing in the corner or running away, right? You know, as somebody tries to punch him. Like he's going to engage. So that's a fight that's probably going to go under owned because there's going to be points scored in that fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I brought it up first. I think it's kind of the one that's really underowned in its range. You're going to have that fight we talked about right there a minute ago with the Chris Duncan and the Yanil Asmus fight. That one's going to absorb a lot of ownership. But I think that one's really, there's two ways that one scores well. It's going to be a Duncan grind out, again, somehow grind out. He's a wrestler from this UK region, which is mind blowing. You never see that. It's usually striking based. So I think a 3-round decision looks well for him, or the finish equity. But the problem is that window gets narrower every single round. It goes, deeper into the fight. So like a second or third round finish for Asmus isn't going to get you to the promised land.
Yeah.
And then you talked about that Parsons and Roberts fight. That one, I think on any other, like an 11 fight slate with this fight in the middle would be very, very, very slam it in and pray you get the right side. But with so many selections, and I also think that both of them being strikers at heart, that I don't know, like a 3rd round finish probably doesn't get you there. But they're both prone to getting knocked out and hurt. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, actually, like that Ash Moon's fights. I mean, I like that fight. I like both sides, like both Duncan and Ash Moon's. Like watching him fight Ash Moon's fight Sam Patterson, like he's got a murderous instinct. So like I actually like that fight to go inside the distance. I don't know exactly what the number is off the top of my head. But like that's one of the reasons that's a fight that I'm targeting for my DFS lineups.
Do you look at the inside the distance lines? What's your process with that? Because I'll give you a little nugget that I like. I like targeting the guys with better inside the distance than their opponent. Like if there's, a plus 200 versus a plus 250, right? And the underdog has a better implied odds. Like that's why I think Mick Parkin is a better play, because he's a better inside the distance line than Pogues. You know what I mean? Like those are the spots long term I like to invest in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at that. I tend to look at the first round finish odds more than the inside the distance, just because like the first round finish is really what pays. And like when you see a guy with 50% or more, right? Like we've seen like Bo Nickel, Aspinall this week, with like 50% or more first round finish, like that tells you something. And then I always want to compare that to ownership. But then even down the card, like I tend to see guys that will be under owned compared to their first round finish odds, and I'm like, that's usually, unless they're super high price, like 9,700 on DraftKings. That's like an area I like to target. And then I also like to target guys that are high volume. So like Nathaniel Wood is a guy I like this card because he's one of the guys, because like a lot of people look at inside the distance lines and first round finish lines, but like it's harder to kind of glean when a guy can outscore, like can put up 30 points or more in a round, and not get the finish. But then that's good. Then it's good for you that the fight's going on, and Wood tends to be a high volume. So I think he's going to be under owned because his like first round finish inside the distance lines aren't that great. But yeah, anytime a guy has a higher inside the distance than his opponent as an underdog, that's something you gotta take a look at, and that's I think why Parkin is pretty popular this card.
Yeah, and I think one fight that's really gone under the radar in that middle range that we were just at, that Fialho and Barres fight, isn't that opening up the night? I think that's the first fight of the night. It's buried down the card. I mean, if these guys hit a ceiling, I think we could be crying. I mean, it's as wide as like a ugly women's MMA, honestly. But I like to target low weight classes. Reason being, Squirrel, high action, right? The heavier weight classes, lower volume, lower wrestling opportunities. These guys probably going to have a lot of wrestling. They're going to have a lot of volume regardless. And I don't know if you like the hidden stats in fantasy. I do. Pitter patter, right? Once you're in top position, play the bongos.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's everything, right? Getting like, there's no other sport, right, where you get points like every time your guys, punching somebody in the face, which is what I love about UFC. Yeah. But the pitter patter and the volume, like that adds up. I mean, they've changed the scoring a couple of years ago to give some points to control time and stuff like that, but it's really nowhere near the points you're getting for significant strikes or takedowns or reversals. So that's the kind of thing that the hidden, like you said, like the hidden fantasy points. That's what you've got to consider. And it's so tempting to go with the heavyweights, and we see with the heavyweight, with Aspinall, like they can get a first round finish, but if it doesn't happen, then then the scoring can be really low, right? I mean, a third round decision in a heavyweight fight is probably the last thing you want, other than like
when their hands are on their hips. You must love it, just like I do. When you fade it and their hands are on their hips and they're like, and they're pointing at each other and they're like, let's throw down, and you're like, go ahead, guys. I'm happy with the 0.4 points. Go for it every strike.
Yeah. I mean, when they're like, kind of stumbling forward, it's gonna be a good fight.
We got about 15 minutes, less than 15, almost 13 left. We got our eye on any late news. I have all the alerts up on my computer in case anything happens. But there's 15 fights. Let's get the first 15 fight slate in a long time going. Now, how are you handling these women fights? I think that's an important one. The Vieira Kianzad, nobody's gonna go to Vieira, and then you got the Brazilian Bannon fight, which, listen, there's some sneaky ugliness in that fight. Like, that is not going to be pretty, and I think it's not going to be pretty good for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Blender likes it, and he'll talk about it, right? That the ugly women's MMA can put up a lot of points, and like women fighters tend to be underowned. But in this case, I feel like it's justified. Like I hate to say it, because like normally I like to be a little bit like Blender and like, I'm going to go overweight the fighters that nobody else wants, and we just saw it last week, right, with the Judakova Nunez fight, where you just never know what's going to happen. There's 15 fights, like Vieira and Kanzad, like that's probably the lowest paced fight of the night. So it's just difficult to get there. Like, I think Vieira is probably my lowest owned fighter, which I put in the expert survey. It's just so difficult to get there. Like, you can just see that being a low volume fight, maybe some grappling and somebody gets one round, then somebody else gets the other round, goes to decision, and just is a mess for the scoring.
Isn't it frustrating that you don't get points for skill based? Because Vieira is way higher level skilled around fighter too. Like, Kianzad more of a kickboxer. It's like, I don't know how Vieira loses this fight besides just deciding to kickbox with Kianzad, and I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think she could just go out there and say, all right, I'm just going to sit here in my shell and play the kickboxing games. And it's like, if I knew that was the game plan and on a smaller card, I'm taking shots on Kianzad all day, and I bet you would too. It's just 15 fights. There's so many better options. And then there's really two inside the distance line guys on this slate that really step out from the crowd. It's Alvarez and Muniz. And I think you got to talk about ceilings on this fight, those two fights. Would you agree? Because with Alvarez, I think earlier in the week, I don't have it in front of me, was minus 125, and Muniz was like minus 115. If they're both dogs, if for leverage, are in play, I think that like Craig is literally could win the fight at any time. Like, he off his back, he's very lethal. He's at a new weight class. He looked okay. I was very surprised. Made the weight. Yeah. Everybody made weight. And then the Alvarez fight, Dia Casey is a wrestler now, John. I mean, I know you're just new to MMA, but Dia Casey was like a kickboxer type fighter that turned D1 wrestling, and now he's scoring a ton of points. I could see that fight like, oh man, if it ends up being like a pull guard Alvarez and then Dia Casey gets the first round, I'm like, damn it, there goes my Alvarez play,
Yeah, it's tough. Actually, I rewatched both Alvarez and Munez's last fights because like I know Alvarez was like a bloody mess by the end of his fight. I think it was Saruki and then Muniz. I didn't watch the Brendan Allen fight. I watched the what's the guy's name? Souza, where he broke the guy's arm. Because I wanted to like see those two fights. Just rewatched those this week. Those are actually two of the guys I like to get to after like reducing my Aspinall ownership a little bit. I'm going to try to be overweight Alvarez and Muniz because they both have good first round finish odds, and I think Aspinall is going to take some of the ownership that those guys should have. But then the leverage plays with the underdogs is very much in play. I think Dia Casey is going to be underowned. I think I'm underweight to him, and I kind of regret that already.
Yeah, no, I feel like of the two leverage, I think DKC is the more interesting because he would be based on wrestling. He would be based on hurting Alvarez, whereas Paul Craig, point per dollar, the dude doesn't do anything until he submits you. like he will give up his back. He will get to the mat. He'll do whatever.
And you said it, like he's coming down in weight. And so there was this thought that like either he might not make weight or he would like look terrible on the scales. And then like he came out in like the blue face paint and stuff and was like screaming. He seemed to have his energy. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that made me a little bit more nervous about Muniz, but it is what it is. I still think Muniz probably wins the fight.
On any other slate, I'm jamming Muniz and Alvarez, and hint, I could want both of them instead of Aspinall too. I think that's another way that you can go and get those ceiling type, because either of those two guys could easily score 115 plus in their ceiling wins. And there's really two other that are like I would look at tournament, but apparently the ownership's there. Muradov is right there below, maybe even with those guys, the Muniz and Alvarez. And I say that because Brian Barberina can't stop a takedown, John. What do we like? We like takedowns and bunches. Like, I want Barberina to get the hell back up. Like you said, I like deep first round finishes, 4.5 minutes, top control, pitter patter, multiple takedowns. That could look like this at 9,500 for Muradov. And honestly, this is going to sound absolutely bizarre and crazy, but Barberina, second and third round, what if Muradov gasses himself out? I'm not playing Barberina, and Barberina is a shell of what he used to be, but for fantasy wise, we didn't tag him. Neither of us did, but like he his type of win looks amazing.
It does. I'm just worried that there's like a lot of mileage there, right? Like there's some tread on the tires, and it like maybe this isn't a fight that he should be taking. So I do like Muradov, and I think Muradov can score well. I just don't. It's harder for me to see Barberina winning this fight, I think, even than TYBURA.
It's a price tag thing too. It's like people I don't think are going to get to Muradov at 95. They're going to go up to Aspinall. They're going to do more barbell type builds. And then why is Molly McCann not higher owned? We're showing her at 27%. I have to imagine that's higher. People are going to clamor to get her into lineups.
Yeah, so actually I mentioned like kind of fading the female fighters because of pace and lack of finishing equity. I think the one exception is Molly McCann. And I know I also said like that I don't necessarily give too much of a nudge to like the UK fighters, but in this case, I think she's second to the last fight of the night. I do think like the crowd's going to be behind her. I think she's like she's in the UFC for these London cards, So like,
she's a cool main event.
Yeah,
she's a 50-50 type of fighter, John, that has the rub of a Conor McGregor. It's fascinating.
I think people that are maybe a little more of a UFC purists aren't going to want to put her into their lineups because she's not necessarily the most she's kind of just a brawler. Like I think that can get it done on this card. And I like her over Stoliarenko. And I think she could, she's going to have some pace and she's going to go out there. And I think that is like the female fight. Like if you add up the fights, the scores from both sides of the female fights, I think that fight's probably going to be the highest scoring of the two female or of the three female fights.
That's a sharp take because that first round equity, do not get in a submission. If she gets submitted by Stoliarenko, that hype's over. I mean, McCann is done. I mean, she's only a 2-1 favorite, but home cooking, let's just say, could be in a decision. And I think the volume's there to score over 3 as well. It's just the pricing on this slate is just wild. There's one fight too in the middle range, well, I guess upper middle, that nobody is talking about, no one's going to go to. And I think there's sneaky finish upside, John. Fares Zime versus Jai Herbert. Talk to me about this, how you're handling it, because Zime has a unique style for fantasy, a unique style for scoring, I'd say. He's a grinder, but he doesn't have a ton of volume.
Yeah, but I think that could change. Like he's young. So he's actually a fighter that I think could be evolving somewhat. So I tried to be a little bit overweight on him just because I think he hasn't been high scoring in the past. I think his highest score is 96 points in a win. But I think he's only 8,700, so that's not that expensive. Where like he needs to put up like a monster score. Like Aspinall might need to put up 115, 120 to be on the winning lineup at 9,700. At 8,700 with Ziam, you have a lot more leeway, and so like I think that, and he could also be evolving somewhat. So like when he gets takedowns, if he throws a little bit of a higher volume than he has in the past, then I think he could put up a score. Like I think he's likely to win, and I think there's a good chance he puts up a higher score in a win than people are expecting.
I mean, I think you start a lineup with him, you're almost unique. 16%. It's like you fade Aspinall and have Ziam, you're going to probably inherently be unique. I mean, there's possibilities on this slate, John, that a 50K unique lineup wins, even in a big GPP. Talk to me on that front.
There's so many combinations. So yeah, there are some times where it's like, oh, I don't want to split the pot, a million ways, and there's only 10 fights on the card or 11 fights on the card, so there's only so many combinations. So you want to like leave a ton of salary on the table so you're unique. This card, there's so many, like 15 fights. I mean, it's literally exponential, right? Like each time you add fights to the card, you're adding 2 more fighters, not so many more combinations. That like I didn't like have a salary requirement with like my 150 lineups or anything like that, where I can only go up to 49.8 or anything like that. I do think like there's a possibility, especially if some of if you see like a Barbarina win, if you see a Craig win, there's a good chance you'll have like a higher salaried but unique winning line.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. We're a few minutes out here, and you said you like the high-paced fighters, and talk to me about Wood. That's really the only fight we haven't really touched on.
Yeah, I just think that so he hasn't put up a ton of points, and he doesn't in the past. I guess he does have like a 126 in his game log, but the number of strikes thrown, I mean, he's gone at least over 150 strikes thrown in his last 4 fights, over 203 of those 4 fights, and that can really add up. So I think that just causes guys to be under-owned because people don't see the inside the distance line. They don't see the first round finish odds and say, oh, well, he's too high priced. But like he can get there in volume alone, and he gets takedowns as well. So he's going to get those points. And so maybe if it becomes like a scramble fest and he's getting like takedowns and the reversals and, stuff like that, that those points can add up.
No, that's for sure. And yeah, it's always scary right before lock 2 minutes. I've got my alerts on. We're keeping an eye on things. It looks like most contests are filled too. I mean, the big tournament out there, the $18 May overlay. How do you attack things like that? Like on contest selection for
so I think that's super important. That's something that I think I've gotten much better at when I'm not on shows, at least, is like going in the last couple minutes and seeing like what is not filled. Is there anything that I can like get a line?
What am I doing?
Yeah, it's not anything that's not filled, and it can be like satellites too, like some of these like satellites, like some of the cross sport satellites, because I'll play almost everything, right? Like I'll play like NBA. They've got like best ball satellites out there, so those are important to take a look at. Like that can be like hidden overlay. People talk about how there's like no longer any overlay. Like there is. You just have to kind of look a little bit harder and have your mind a little more open to like what you're going to play in order to find it. Like you're not necessarily going to find overlay in like the big 150 contest, the contest with the biggest prize pools, but it is out there, so you can find it, and that adds up over time.
No, for sure. I love those types of satellites. Those are sneaky ones to get into. We really broke down the slate from the X's and O's, and I think that's really important to give viewers and the average person like a couple bucks too. Like they have $1.25. I'm sure you and I aren't allowed to play them anymore, but getting into those contests and then turning them into a min cash, even, I mean, you're giving yourself a ceiling. That's really the important thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot about that. There can be more overlay in the low dollar contests that I have like filtered out. Like I don't even take a look at them because I can't go into them. But yeah, there can be overlay there as well. So that's a good thing to take a look at.
Awesome, John. I think we did a great job on our first show together. 15 fights. Next week, we're at 12. UFC 291. Might be Blender, might not be. Listen, we're not going to allow Blender on any 15 card fight. He's been saying, I need 15 fights. I need 15. I mean, is this not a Blender fight card?
Yeah.
Squirrel. I mean, it is 15 fights.
Yeah, I mean, well, but there's a good reason, right? Like, with the more fights, I think the more variance, the more randomness. I mean, if you think about it, if you had like 1,000 fight card, right? It'd be insanity. Like, you don't know what the scores would be. And so I think the more fights, it is like it's an easier way to get off the chalk because there's just going to be some variance, some randomness. Like we saw last week, right? Like somebody's going to fall down, dislocate their elbow, and their opponent's going to have a 120-point score, right? 15 fights. So it should be a good card. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I am too. For producer Rob, for myself, for John, we are headed out of here. We will wish you the best of luck.